Hello, and welcome to Getting the Most from a Writers Association. We've got a great group of panelists with us today who are going to tell you how to do exactly that. Jamaila Brinkley, Lee Murray, Bud Sparhawk, and Amy Kaplan. My name is Jean Marie Ward. I'm going to be your moderator today. I write fiction, nonfiction, and everything in between. And I, too, for my sins, have belonged to writers' associations. But you aren't interested in my stories. What you are interested in the stories of our esteemed panelists. And I'll have them get to it right away, but first we have some administrative details to take care of. First off, this panel is being recorded. Secondly, if you've got a question for the panelists, please go to the bottom of your screen and click on the Q&A button. A pane will pop up and you can type your questions in there. I'm not planning to take questions until further into the program, but we will look at all the questions and try to get to them. If you're on dial-in, please dial *9 and there will be a prompt that helps you do the same thing. Finally, on the administrative front, Virtual Balticon is coming to you free, but they would really appreciate a donation to help them do such things as virtual conventions, virtual panels, so that we can bring in people from overseas. Lee Murray is coming to us from New Zealand next year at Balticon 2021, where we hope to be back in the Inner Harbor. Just go to the balticon.org site and you can hit the button there. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves and then tell us exactly which writers' organizations they belong to. Take it away, Jamaila.
Oh, me, yay. Okay, I'm Jamaila Brinkley. I write both historical fantasy and contemporary romance, and I am currently the president of the Maryland chapter of Romance Writers of America.
Okay, great. Lee?
Hi, my name is Lee Murray and I'm a writer of science fiction, fantasy and horror from New Zealand. I'm also an editor. And I'm kind of addicted to writing organisations. I've got a little list and I can tell you all of the ones I belong to. I belong to the Horror Writers Association, the Australian Horror Writers Association, the New Zealand Society of Authors. I'm the co-founder of Young New Zealand Writers for youth writers. I'm a life member of Speculative Fiction Writers of New Zealand and a life member of Tauranga Writers, which is New Zealand's longest running local writing group. I'm a member of Book Rat, which is a children's writing group just here locally. I'm a writer of the Editors, a member of the Editors Association, the International Media Writers, Tie-in Writers Association, the International Thrillers Writers Association, and I think that might be most of them.
Oh, most of them, Bud.
You needed a cheat sheet.
Over to you, Bud. Unmute yourself.
I'm not a joiner.
Yeah, that's a lie, and I know it's a lie.
I've been a member of SIFWA since, well, there's two ways. I took a 13-year hiatus in early on, and after I qualified. A long story there, but anyway, I guess I've been writing for a member of the SIFWA for 30-some years. Let me leave it that way. And then when I tried to rejoin, I found out that my original qualifications still qualified me to be an active member, but I nevertheless waited till I had 3 more stories sold before I got that in there. I have been in SIFWA for a long time, and 11 years ago, I decided to join the organization and become part of the ruling clique in it. And for 11 years of service, I got this piece of plastic. Oops,
which we can't see.
See. Oh, there you go.
Oh, now, okay.
No, well, anyway, this is the Kevin O'Donnell Award. It's a big hunk of plastic that now holds down some papers on my desk on there. But I was started off as a board member, became the treasurer as an elected position, and that migrated into becoming the chief financial officer. with a huge staff supporting me. And I did that for 8.5 years. And I don't think you can make more commitment than to spend that much time doing the finances of SIFLA.
Absolutely. And we are all incredibly grateful for that, for the job you did and for straightening them out. Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Kaplan. I write under the name A.L. Kaplan, science fiction and fantasy and depressing poems. And I am presently the Vice President of the Maryland Writers Association.
Great.
Yeah, that's the only one, sorry. I don't have the big long list like
We
Lee.
can't all be Lee.
Right. I was in another group, but I'm not going to go there.
Okay. Well, basically that sort of shoots most of my my first question in the, well, we won't say where it shoots my first question, but let me start with this one. What prompted you to join the Maryland Writers Association, Amy?
So I had written my first great novel, the one that's still on a shelf. And I wanted to learn more about, it really was my first. I majored in art, not literature. And I went to a writing conference. It was actually the way they had it set up at the time. It was cheaper for me to become a member and then pay for the conference than just do straight the conference. So I joined. Mm-hmm. And it was a number of years later before I got involved with volunteering, but that's how it got me in the door, and I learned a lot at that conference and subsequently as time went by.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lee, you've got a list.
Yeah, I have.
What prompted you?
Yeah, like Amy, I started with the local group, and I think you find your tribe there. And I got so much out of the local group, so much support when I was just learning to write. I come from a science background myself, so I didn't know much about writing, and I kind of learned on the heat. So I joined. We actually went to a local community writing group, and that person who ran that was very involved in the local writing group, which is, like I said, the longest running group in the country. And so I joined that, and I got so much out of that group, learning, critiquing and networking, and so much motivation and support that I just went on from there. So I did start locally as well, Amy, and I think that is a good place to start.
Do you ever get organizational overload with so many memberships?
Well, obviously as a writer, you can claim that on your tax. So, it's worth it, and there's just so many benefits. There are so many benefits of being involved. And I consider myself an active member in probably, 8 out of 10 of them. So, some of them I'm less active because I'm not necessarily doing so much in those areas at the time. But generally, I try to stay as active as I can. And I think the more active you are, the more you get out of it. So
okay, yeah, that's actually something I want to address a little bit later, but good. But what prompted you to join SIFWAT twice?
I don't know. I just enjoy being tortured, I guess. It's the first time I wanted to do it just to get the credential on my letters to the editor when I sent in something. Then I found out that the editors don't read the damn things, and SIFWA meant absolutely nothing. So I gave that up. But then I was already hooked on the organization and the contacts I'd made through that, and the fact that you get to go conventions for free as long as you stand up and don't embarrass yourself. Although a couple times that hasn't worked.
You don't embarrass yourself as much as some other folks I can name, but that's not this
panel.
Let's
name them.
Anyway, because I noticed something appeared in chat, I should explain what SIFWA is. Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. It's the professional organization for speculative fiction writers in America. And we're going to get into, some of the international groups a little bit later, but I just wanted to make that clear. Now, Jamaila is a very active member in another national American group.
What you're saying is you see my emails.
Yes. The Romance Writers of America, specifically the Maryland Romance Writers of America, Maryland chapter of the Romance Writers of America. What prompted you to join the RWA, which is, again, shorthand for Romance Writers of America?
Yeah, so for those who don't know, as Jean Marie said, it's Romance Writers of America is the trade organization for romance writers. It's a 501c6, so we're a professional organization, just like SIFWA. What made me, so there's sort of two levels for me, because there's both the national level and the local level, which are a little more compartmentalized for RWA than for other organizations, because we have chapters as well as the national organization. A lot of our chapters are geographical. There's also other chapters that are more online, that focus more on subject matter or special interest and things like that. But for me, at the national level, it was education and access, because I was early in my writing career and I knew that I didn't know things. And RWA has a lot of really good education resources, everything from classes to chapter-based contests, which is actually how I got my first publishing contract, things like that. And then at the local level, it's absolutely 100% community. I went to meetings of the Maryland Romance Writers when I was a baby writer, and they were so welcoming and so helpful that, like, there was no other choice. Like, why would I not join? And I come to romance through science fiction, which is a little weird. I had been coming to conventions like Balticon. I've been coming to Balticon since I was 18 years old. And so I had sort of known about the writers organization thing, that they existed, but SIFWA, it turned out that I was writing more romance than science fiction. And also SIFWA is for professional writers who are already published. And for me, RWA was a really great help. It was really helpful early on in my career, because they don't have that barrier to entry.
So let's get a slightly different variant on the questions that I was talking about before the panel. What did, and I'll ask you all, I'll ask actually the women, Bud, because I've got a different question for you. What did RWA, your local Horror Writers Association, Maryland Romance Writers, offer you as a baby writer? So Jamaila, just keep going, and then I'll get back to Lee and Amy. What, no, I mean, seriously, why not? Because you brought the subject up. Let's just transition into that.
Yeah, so as a baby writer, for me personally, I'm a violent extrovert, right? Like, I need people. Like, this time has been very hard for me. But
I hear you, sister.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest things it did was connect me with people who actually had the same stuff going on. They had the same viewpoint and the same goals as I did, right? Like, I have tons of connections with all sorts of people, right? Like, my local Facebook mommy group is really great, and they support me in a whole bunch of different ways. And the people who I worked with in my previous professional career are really great, and they support me in a whole lot of different ways. But having access to a group of people who were all, like, sort of single-mindedly pursuing the same goal I was, and were at various levels in their pursuit of that, was a huge thing for me, because I'm really people-oriented.
Mm-hmm. Great. Lee, what did your local, it was Horror Writers, right? That your entry drug?
No, it was just a local Tauranga writers. It's a local hobbyist, writers group. Yeah, and some professional, some hobbyists. Yes, it's our longest.
What did they offer you as a baby writer?
Right. Well, as a baby writer, look, I think Jamaila said it very well, and a very famous chieftain in New Zealand said it as well. He said, it's the people, it's the people, it's the people. And, it's the networking, it's the contacts with your tribe, the people who get you, who are trying to do what you are wanting to do or have already done it, that motivation, that community. It's the people, it's the people. It's
okay,
the people.
Great. Great, yeah. Amy, What about Maryland Writers Association was a boost to you as a baby writer?
Well, definitely what they said, the people who were welcoming and they offered classes, that especially at the conference had all sorts of panels on topics that I had not a clue about until I got there. I had a lot to learn, and back when I had first joined, I think there were only like 2 chapters, one in Annapolis and one in Baltimore, and now we have rapidly growing. We have about 11 chapters, soon to have 12.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we gained 3 chapters this past year in Cumberland, Prince George's, and I am blanking out on the other, but the newest one that we're going to be voting on, the board has to approve it, so the perspective chapter is St. Mary's and Calvert counties.
I understand from the chat, because I am glancing at it from time to time, that you've got over 700 members now.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, we've grown a lot in the last few years, and we were supposed to have our conference in March, and obviously that didn't happen. So we've been doing webinars that are free for all our members about once a month. We're going to start doing it quarterly, and our chapters are now, a lot of them are meeting virtually, just trying to accommodate and
trying to cope.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to go to the next level. I mean, RWA, I presume all of the associations that you mentioned, Lee, and I know SIFWA are more targeted towards writers who have made the jump to professional sales, whether it be selling a book for a certain amount or getting a certain amount of sales indie. So, but what does SIFWA have to offer the writer who has reached what they consider professional status?
Well, I think the thing that we're most famous for is Writer Beware, which is the website that everybody in the writing community goes to find out if the editors and people they're dealing with are scam artists or not. And they've exposed quite a few. And it's been a very, very good thing. All volunteers, by the way. The thing I found when I joined SIFWA is I immediately had a circle of friends who were also introverted, shy people who were afraid to send anything in to anybody. And we formed a little group on CompuServe at that time. And
that brings me back.
It was very different than Facebook. And we sort of hit off at each other to write stories. And Jeff Koistra and I would do that. By the way, Jeff got credit for the first story I published in Analog for 13 years. When I got back, they put his name on the table of contents as the author.
Oh, no.
And in subsequent issues, my name was all over the magazine with Stan Schmidt trying to apologize 17 ways from Sunday about this. But I think that camaraderie, the ability to know people, is the big important thing that I got out of SIFWA. Brenda Clough told me one time, she said, there's 2 things about going to the green room at Balticon, is the first time you go, you're just in awe of all the well-known writers in there. And nobody knows who you are. The second turn is when you go in and everybody knows who you are. And that's a very enlightening experience, because now you're on an equal to other professionals. Not necessarily those that make the big bucks, but like most of us, by the way, I get checks for 4 figures sometimes. And it lets me afford get an extra fries on my McDonald's order on there.
Yes, some of my 4-figure checks are 2 on either side of the decimal.
Exactly. But yeah, writing is a national, it's a hobby for people who enjoy poverty, I guess, on there.
There is that.
One thing, I was a member of the Maryland Writers Organization, Annapolis branch, for a brief while. And then I discovered that everybody that came to the meetings were essayists who wrote memoirs. And there was zero connection between us. So I gave it up after about 6 meetings on there and tried to find something else to do with my time. The one who was in charge of that, by the way, kept saying, didn't know who I was for the first 2 meetings at all. And he asked me publicly, he says, do we know you? And I said, oh yeah, I'm Bud Sparhawk. And everybody in the room went, so.
Yeah, they knew you even if he didn't. Yes. Somebody was about to say something?
You should come back. We've grown quite a bit. Oh.
Okay.
And still writing memoirs, no doubt.
No, well, there are memoir writers, but we have writers from all genres now. And even we have some poetry groups that have got formed in the last few years. So really, we're expanding.
I can no longer join the Maryland Writers Association.
You
since
can.
I live in Virginia now.
Oh, we got members in Pennsylvania.
That helps me a lot.
Okay, Amy. Basically, what does the Maryland Writers Association have for those who are further along in their journey, who have made professional, say, what the science fiction and fantasy writers of America or romance writers consider professional sales? What do they offer for people further along their journey?
Well, I mean, that's a little harder, but we do have several members that are well-established writers. We have, well, they're the conferences, we bring in agents. There's always leadership roles.
Yeah, are they acting as mentors to the younger or the newer authors, I should say?
Some are. Some are. We don't have an official mentor program. We have chapter officers and then the state or leaders.
So basically, you're saying what I'm hearing is Maryland Writers Association is kind of an entry drug.
Well, we're trying to change that. We also have publications. We do this year we did a poetry contest. There was no entry fee. It was last year we had an anthology that we put out. So there are opportunities in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Lee. Oh, you muted yourself.
Yes, someone arrived at my door.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want me to skip you and come back?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
So,
which of the many organizations that you belong to would you say is most helpful for a writer who's further along in their journey, who's made their first professional sales, going forward?
They all offer something different. And I think it depends on the particular project you're talking about. You know, if you've got something that has a local focus, you might want to focus on your local group. And if you have something you want to get out globally, then obviously your international, genre organization might be the right place. But almost all writers group offer certain things. Like they pretty much all offer some sort of resource page or website, or they all have resources apart from the people themselves. They often give you information about various markets where you might publish your work, or at least competitions, that sort of thing. There'll be contacts with conventions and literary events in your neighborhood or your country, or that you might be interested in your genre. So that's always helpful. And once you're in a writing group, then you have access to panels and presentations, either being on them or attending them and upskilling yourself with professional development. And then you can also pitch your work at conventions or at your writers group. They might bring along a publicist or an agent. There are no agents in New Zealand, but they might bring along a publicist or a publisher or someone else who might be able to connect you with someone who who might be able to help you with where you might get your work published. So there's all of those, that networking aspect. There's also almost all writers group do some kind of showcase publication. Even my local writers group does a little publication where everybody can put their work in and get themselves mentored and up to par. But the thing that I am most, you know, passionate about is mentorship and assessment programs. And the first time I ever was involved with one of these was with the New Zealand Society of Authors, and I applied as a mentee, and I was paired with an iconic New Zealand writer, Graham Lane. It's a little bit like Bud mentioned before, you know, the awe, oh my gosh, you know, they paired me with this amazing person, and he was fantastic. He was also a former English teacher, so he was just so super duper, and I just learned so much from him. I still contact him occasionally. He is super helpful. So that mentorship program was it just grew my knowledge and my understanding, and the fact that I just didn't know anything so much. I just realized what I could learn on this one-to-one basis. And I later became a mentor of that program, and then I became a selector of that program. I've also been a convener of that program, and I'm also a huge advocate of that program. And I have extended that program to other writing groups. So I know that speculative fiction writers of New Zealand now do that, and you know, and the Australian Horror Writers Association also does that now. It's a fantastic program. They've got some great mentors on there, and I know that they're working with, you know, really helping to develop new writers coming through, because, you know, we need this critical mass if we're going to make a mark anywhere, especially here in New Zealand, where we've just got this tiny group of, you know, great talent, but we need to get it out to the world. And I've also done it with young writers, you know, nationally, to grow new writers, because, you know, we need new writers coming through. And then this year I was lucky enough to be awarded Horror Writers Association Mentor of the Year. So huge honor. And but I just, the benefits, you could say, oh, thank you, but the benefits are huge, you know, not just from it's both, it's, you know, it's a two-way street. You know, you get so much from, you know, you just have to put a little bit in and you just get so much back. So I'm just a huge advocate of mentorship programs for developing new writers, and for the mentors as well, you know, for just being visible and getting a sneak peek at, you know, fresh writing coming through and new writers. It's fabulous.
Cool. Now, Jamaila, as a member of Romance Writers of America myself, I know that they have two different tracks running. One is the effort to train, to educate new writers. And that's a very big part of what they do. And, you know, when I meet somebody in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area, I always say that if you want a writers organization, since I'm not in Maryland either, Amy, I point them in the direction of the chapters for RWA. What does RWA, Romance Writers of America, offer their published writers? Because I know they've got a published writers network. A published authors network. I belonged to it for 14 years. Oh, God.
So this is actually one of the things that sets RWA apart, right? And one of the things that they work really, really hard on is the fact that they have resources and stuff to help writers at all stages of their career, right? We go from the pre-published to the bestseller and beyond in both directions. And the organization works really hard to make sure that they are actually benefiting everybody. And it's a struggle, like, I'm not gonna lie, like it's hard to balance that, but I think RWA does a pretty good job. So we talked a little bit about what they do for new writers. And I wanna point out that the things that an organization does for published writers and professional writers later in their career also benefit new writers.
Okay.
Right? Like, because new writers are going to be published writers and professional writers. And that's sort of the viewpoint of RWA, is that you're starting here, but you're going to wind up here. So the stuff that we do up here is meant to trickle down, right? And the biggest thing that I always tell people about RWA is advocacy. It's a huge deal. RWA is a BMF. it's huge, right?
Yeah.
And it is deeply, deeply involved in the romance industry. A lot of that happens behind the scenes, but you hear about it later. Things like when publishers are in breach of contract, RWA can reach out to them and on behalf of its authors and work with the parties to help resolve that and figure out what's going on. Things like when in the indie space, when Amazon is doing hinky things with Kindle Unlimited's publishing pot and that sort of thing and allowing scammers to do all kinds of weird stuff, RWA has reached out about that sort of thing. So like there's a lot of back end advocacy because there's a lot of industry contacts that RWA maintains because it is such a huge organization that contains so many romance writers, right? Like it is the professional organization for romance writers. And so chances are, if you know a romance writer or know of a romance writer, they're part of RWA and they're represented by RWA. They also are really great. We talked about education and community, and that's still important when you're a published professional, right? Like we never stop learning. RWA also has really cool, something I personally love is that RWA has some really cool academic stuff going on. They sponsor some scholarships and they sponsor some academic research into like things like the history of the romance genre and feminism and romance and how they interact, and all sorts of really interesting academic studies have come out, and a lot of that is actually sponsored by RWA, which is really, really cool. Like it's really cool that they're both involved on the industry side and the academic side, and I think that benefits all of us because it creates a robust industry for published authors.
Great. I'm going to do a quick lightning round before we start because we've got at least 3 questions, all of which that are going to have some interesting, at least to me, it looks like they're going to have some interesting answers. But very quickly, I just want to tag Bud, Lee, and Amy. I'm pretty sure I know the answer for SIFLA, but do the organizations that you all represent also conduct advocacy and legal support? And do they also conduct research? So Bud, Lee, Amy.
SIFLA has a huge fund available to support writers who are in have legal problems. We are also advocates for copyright. We have Michael runs over to the copyright office to the hearings there and puts in our 2 cents on a regular basis. One point I want to make to everybody out there is that there seems to be a big focus on if I join the organization, what do I get in return? And I think that's the wrong question that a writer should do. The writer should do, what can I contribute? What can I add to the mix that isn't there now?
Yeah, volunteerism, I think everybody on this panel would agree that you get more out of an organization if you volunteer than if you just sit back and wait for manna to fall from heaven.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Lee, what advocacy, copyrights, scholarship, do any of the organizations to which you belong work in that area, or is it difficult because you have some international organizations there?
Yeah, generally the national and international organisations all do advocacy, legal support, all of those kinds of things, and the local groups tend to do less of that, although they still will, but less of that. It's more the national and international bodies that do that. But I just want to echo what Bud said. It isn't about what can I get out of it. I have done a number of, you do the call up, are you going to join this year? I've done a number of those campaigns as secretary of various organisations, and people would say, oh, I don't know what am I going to get out of it? It's this much money. Am I going to see the return? And my answer is always, yes, you will see the return if you jump in and you get involved, and the more you're involved, the more you get back. But I think the other idea is that if you don't want to be active, if you're not an extrovert, or you don't feel you have the energy, but you can still support it, and you can pay your membership and consider it a donation towards the people who are prepared to get in and do the advocacy and do, offer up the scholarships, support the scholarships and all of those kinds of things. So I feel that there's still a reason to be involved, even if you can't necessarily be hugely active. But like Bud says, the more active you are, the more you're going to get out of it, for sure.
And I know that some of those organizations, and I know, again, I'm speaking from SIFWA, do have not only advocacy, but medical relief. And right at the moment, I believe SIFWA is doing a COVID relief fund for
Yes.
some of its writers. Yeah.
Mm,
Okay,
yeah.
Amy, I know that Maryland Writers Association has a smaller budget for some of these things, but are they working in these areas?
At this time, no, but I've been taking notes for things since I'm on the
Hey,
board.
That's,
Right now, we're a little too small. We are a nonprofit. Everything is entirely volunteers. And yes, I think I've learned more once I started volunteering than when I was just sitting back as a member. I mean, I was at a little chapter meeting and someone said, "Hey, we need a new secretary." I am an introvert. I'm shy. I have a
yeah,
dog on
right.
my shoulder for a reason. I'm shy. And it's gotten me to be a lot, I mean, ended up later becoming president of the chapter, and I had to stand up in front of that group of people and introduce our speakers, because we brought in speakers from all over the place.
Okay. Okay, we've got 3 good questions. I think the first one's going to be kind of quick, because I'm not sure who would know the answer to this. Rebecca Violet asks, are there writing organizations that include script writing? Are there any you would recommend?
SIFLA.
There's also a Screenwriters Guild.
Okay. Lee?
Yes, and there's national and international screenwriters guilds.
Okay.
Just
Amy?
Google.
What they said.
Okay,
I mean,
great.
we have a few screenwriters in MWA, but I could only name 1 or 2 of them off the tip of my tongue right now. We're still growing in that area.
Yeah,
But yeah, what they said.
Yeah, I don't think RWA doesn't have, well, okay, but this is something that actually does speak to RWA. Jennifer Bryn writes, there have been a number of recent kerfuffles in writers' organizations. How are the ones you are in moving forward to avoid the problems in the future? Take it away, Jamaila.
Why would you look at me? I don't understand. No. So you might have heard that RWA has had a rough time recently, and also in the last 30 years. We reached a crisis point. Actually, SIFWA had a similar crisis a couple years ago. We're basically a couple years behind them. We are in a rebuilding stage, and the new board is working really, really hard to literally rebuild from the ground up, because we realized that a lot of our policies and procedures were based in issues with systemic bias, and it became very public knowledge when things happened as a result of that. And we realized that everything had to be completely torn apart and rebuilt. And the new board is working on it frantically. I happen to know that they are working on weekends, even though they're not supposed to be.
Given the situation, I am not surprised, not just with what happened, but with COVID.
Yeah, and things take time. And when you're talking about rewriting policy, which is literally writing policy, like it's not just, oh, let me just do a quick read through of this, or let me just send an email to somebody. It's literally writing like everything. And that does take time, because you have to get together with a group of people to do it, and you have to run it through lawyers and all this stuff, but they are doing it. They're working through it. They've already made a few announcements, so I think there's a few more coming out very soon. And Elizabeth is in the audience tonight.
Yes.
She can add a few things if she wants to, but I know that they are on track. We have lost quite a bit because of what happened, and I'm not going to go into every little thing that happened.
No, you don't have to. Yeah.
You can, if you need to know. There's a author, Claire Ryan, wrote up a big old article about it. She
Blog.
tracked everything as it was happening. You can go to her website and read it all. It's great reading.
And she's a sci-fi fantasy writer normally, but she was one of the best reporters on this.
She did a
But
fantastic-
what was the key to fixing the problems we encountered in SIFWA a few years ago?
I think the whole thing goes back to Russell Davis when he was president. We started a concerted effort. Actually, it started under Michael Capobianco's presidency, but the board started a process of professionalizing the running of the organization, getting people in there who have experience and knowledge and were able to contribute. And over the years, it got better and better and better. Professionalizing the financial sector of the organization was one thing. Getting a set of rules laid down that we didn't have to have continual reinterpretation of the mission of the organization. Also fighting the impression that SIFWA is a huge organization of millions of people, and we're responsible for any kerfluffle happen anywhere in hard science fiction. We got dragged into things like the puppies scenario a couple years ago.
Yeah.
We had nothing to do with it. We keep getting complaints about, why don't you do something about the Hugos, which has nothing to do with SIFWA.
I know.
Aside from the fact we're providing most of the winners. But yeah, I think getting the organization professionalized and getting people who really know about things outside of the writing organization involved in the decision making has really smoothed things out for us.
I will also add that I think one of the things that SIFWA has done very well is created an atmosphere that makes it clear that rules will be followed. Right? Like that is one of the things that RWA has struggled with, is that there's these little loopholes always for bad behavior. And this is one of the things that I know that the new board is working on in terms of their policies, to make everything very, very clear about what is not allowed and what is not appropriate in a professional organization. It's not a social club. It's a professional organization for writers who are pursuing a career. And that has to be made clear.
Yes. Okay. Have you faced these issues in your organizations, Lee?
Yeah, I've been on a number of committees where various, issues have arisen, and generally, as you say, that they've arisen because the Constitution hasn't been clear enough, or there's been some kind of loophole, or there's been some behavioural issue that has been permissible because procedures were a little loose, and so it is important to revisit those often and to make sure that they are brought up to speed with the current climate. And the industry, if we're talking about fiction, is changing so quickly, and the way we deliver the stories and books and the way people do business, and so just online, social media, what are the rules? So I think it's very important to make those policy documents very clear, not be a hothead. That's probably a good approach.
To be a part of the solution, not the problem.
And I think Bud's right. I think professionalism, bringing in those professionals to give you expert advice where you can, and paying for it. I mean, I think that is, is important in order to get the right input. Those are the ways that we can avoid some of these heartaches. And basically, people just need to behave with themselves. Act the way you would want to be treated. And if we all did that, and we all behaved, with kindness and generosity, we wouldn't have these issues. So,
the good old-fashioned golden rule. Yeah. I suspect the Maryland Writers Association has sort of skated past this right now because it was local.
It was local, but that doesn't mean we didn't have some issues. And this past year, we actually updated our bylaws to clarify what powers certain roles have, and to make sure we had oversight.
Good. Okay, we've got one more question, then I'm going to ask everybody to give a quick where people can find you on the web, your website or something, so they can find more of all of your good writing. Because I know we've got a tremendous pool of talent here. So, okay, the question from Arthur Borman is, to what degree are these writing associations like labor organizations / unions?
I can actually answer that.
Okay, go.
it's a very specific legal definition. RWA, and I believe all the others, are not actually allowed to be unions because our members are individual entrepreneurs, and it has to do with competing stuff and monopolies and things like that. Like, I don't know all of the technical terms, but we are not a union. It's a 501c6, which is a very specific trade organization. So in terms of like collective bargaining, it's not, and unions operate under really very specific legal definitions and legal terms and what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do. There's like whole sections of the law written just for unions. And those are not what writing organizations are. Trade organizations and professional organizations are a different thing. It sometimes can feel like they're unions because we're all, working together against, big bad Amazon or whatever, like, but it's not the same. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I think all the writers' organizations are nonprofit organizations under the law, and they have certain tax advantages as a result of that. But if you're really interested in getting it, look up the definition of a 501c3 and a 501c6 organization. C3 is charitable. C6 is a little looser than that.
Is it different for down in New Zealand and in the international organizations that you are part of, Lee?
No, it's the same. That we're non-profit, societies. Yeah.
Okay. I don't think this comes up for Maryland, does it, Amy?
No.
Okay, good.
Or
All right.
as we joke, unprofitable.
Yeah, well, that's sort of writing, period. Okay, we got 4 minutes. Please give our folks a little bit about where they can find you on the web. So, Jamaila?
You can find me at JamailaBrinkley.com. If you ever struggle to spell Jamaila, it's just like Jamaica, but with an L instead of a C. There you go. I've been telling people that for a really long time. Thanks, Mom.
Wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
I had to figure that one out in elementary school.
Okay. Lee?
Yes,
Where can they find you on the web?
On the web at leemurray.info, and I'm on social media as well.
Okay, great. Bud?
I'm putting it up there, my website, and the fact that I seem to have a large page on Wiki for some reason. I don't know why. But
how many short stories have you written?
Have I written?
Well, how many have you published? I believe the number is still large but manageable.
Yeah, it's 136, but if you count the reprints and the foreign sales and so forth and all, never appear anywhere, I don't know, somewhere around 150.
Yeah, right. That's why you have that big page, but yeah. Okay, where can they find you?
I put my website up on there, budsparhawk.com, and the wiki, so there.
Great. Okay, Amy?
You can find me at alkaplanauthor.com. I also just put it up on the chat. And I'll also be doing on a few panels on Monday, including a reading at 10 a.m. Monday morning. Yay!
Yeah, well, you don't have to compete with the late night programming on Monday morning this year, that's for sure. Okay, if you're interested in what I do, I'm at jeanmarieward.com, but I'm not as interesting as these people.
Yes,
I want to thank all of the panelists for doing a great job with this, and I want to thank all the audience for joining us at, oh my God, we've got another question. While the masquerade was going on, okay, basically somebody, Ronald Jones asked if you could post your web addies for your associations in the Q&A chat.
I think they're all in there. If you scroll up, I think they've been posted.
Yep.
Okay.
But we can do it again, certainly.
Okay, and Kathy, if we could just keep that live for a minute or two so these could be posted. Our wonderful tech. I also want to thank, before we go, our amazing tech for Virtual Balticon 54. The crew has been amazing, and Kathy Overton, who's been the tech for this panel, Want to give a big round of applause or virtual applause for that too. So, okay, we're counting down to 50, and I think we should be okay if all of those things are typed in. Yeah, I think we're all in, so that's it. Thank you all, and have a wonderful Balticon 54. Stay safe, everybody. Bye-bye.